And when you do that, I don't know, nothing restores my faith in humanity more than like solo traveling, because people are generally kind. That's what you learn. That's so exciting. Hi.
Hello. Hi.
How? So you want to talk about traveling? Just jump right in. Right the fuck in.
Yeah, because I feel like that's been, I don't know, it's something that's a value for both of us, especially when we were like in our 20s, how important traveling was, I
Mm-hmm.
think, for us to kind of develop our sense of self, maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think it might be fun to just like talk about that.
Yeah, because I would definitely like to talk about it, because I think a lot of people, especially women, are scared to travel by themselves. And I
Mhm.
think it's like hands down one of the most important things like a woman can like do for herself. Because
See,
there's
I
nothing that's
honestly
like,
haven't done much of that though, completely by myself. I've always like linked up with other people.
mm,
Like I've had little bits like within the
mm-hmm.
bigger traveling, but never like a full trip by myself. But that's something we've talked about that like is on the bucket list for sure. But yeah, talk to me about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like both. And also I think it's fun to talk about because the way I like to travel has like changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like even just now, Ben and I got back from like a 2 week trip. We did a week in Asheville and a week in St. Martin, and I was like, this is long.
Okay.
Whereas I used to go on like 3 month trips, even the last one in the fall, which was, I think that was like 8 weeks. It was almost 2 months. And I was like, by
Mm-hmm.
the end of it, I was like, okay, time to go home. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so solo travel, I don't know. We don't have to talk about that first, but it's definitely something I try and get myself to do. And it's something that makes me nervous at first. Like, that's the other thing, is I think that people are like, "Oh, you're so brave," or whatever. You just go travel by yourself. I'm like, "No, I actually get like nervous and scared and try to like
Mm-hmm.
get friends to join me." I'm like, "Come meet me. I don't want to be alone."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I do it, the thing that's different about solo travel is that you don't have the comfort of a friend or somebody that you're with. So you're like, if you go to eat at a restaurant, for example, you're just so much more likely to like strike up a conversation with the
Mm-hmm.
person like sitting by themselves or sitting near you, or the group of people sitting near you. And when you do that, I don't know, nothing restores my faith in humanity more than like solo traveling, because people are generally kind. That's what you learn.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, I don't know. It's not what the media wants you to think right now anyway. So,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I love it. I remember like just talking on the phone with you when you were first wherever you were in Europe when you were like on your solo leg of your trip and
Mm.
just hear you kind of working through like some of those bubbles and I don't know. I just like how thoughtfully you kind of approach that where you're acknowledging the resistance around being alone and then but
Mhm.
then you like push through it and you like made all sorts of friends and you went to like a
Yeah.
freaking like music festival in the middle of the like the woods. It was
Seriously.
amazing. Yeah.
That was hands down one of the best experiences of my life. It was so
Mm.
crazy. I can't remember, have I told the Wolf Cop story on the podcast before?
I don't know if it was on our Patreon or
Oh, it's
not.
on our
I know you did
Patreon.
a I'm not sure. I know
Cause
you
I
did a
gotta tell
recap, but talk
I
about it.
gotta I
Yeah.
gotta tell the like how it came to be, because it's just
Yeah.
crazy and it was like so
Yeah.
nuts of me. So one thing that I also do when I do travel by myself, or I'm traveling for a longer period of time. This is the other thing. When I'm traveling by myself, I try to have like looser plans, because
Hmm.
what will happen is you'll like run into someone, you'll be at a cafe, some like person will see that like you'll strike up a conversation or whatever, and then you'll end up doing something so much more spontaneously, right? But this
Mm-hmm.
was by far the most spontaneous thing I've
Yeah.
ever done. And also felt a little crazy, but it ended up working out so beautifully. Anyway, I was in Spain, met a South African guy there. We like went to like the lighthouse together, had a great time. He's a lovely human. And then he was like, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to South Africa," obviously, telling him I was going to his country. This happened to be my fourth time to South Africa, which is also kind of weird in and of itself because I've never planned to go to South Africa. I've actually just always ended up like going with someone or company in
Okay.
them. Like once was with my family, once was with my little sister, once was with my little brother. Because
Mhm.
I'm like the traveler in the family, and so it was like, oh, your little brother's going to South Africa. Will you go with them? And I would be like, yeah.
Mhm.
Do I get a plane ticket out of this? Yes, I'm sold.
Right,
So anyway,
right.
like in my early 20s. Um, but anyway, so he's like, when you land in South Africa, in Cape Town specifically, there is a music festival outside of Cape Town that you have to go to. And I was like, oh, I don't really like music festivals because there's just like honestly too many people. Like it's just like hectic
Mhm.
and crowded and pushy. And I just like can't get into that. And he was like, oh, no, 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 no. This is a tiny music festival. It's probably only like 1,000 people over like a pretty big space along this river. And everyone's so kind and so welcoming. You'll feel so like, it'll just be lovely, I promise. Like, he was like, there's nothing like it. And he convinced me. So I bought a ticket and like they had these glamping tickets, luckily, that were like these tents. So I could like go there and not have to worry about camping gear and stuff like that. So I get a
Mhm,
ticket
mhm.
to this thing, and I'm trying to convince the two girls that I'm meeting in South Africa to come with me, but they were both like, nah, for different reasons. Totally fine. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be able to go. And then I was like asking the South African, I was like, would it be safe for me to go? Because I actually trusted that he wouldn't lead me astray. Because part of it was like, I think he had a sense of pride about his country. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So there's also like he wouldn't want me to like go somewhere by myself and be in danger. Like I could, he like that just like wasn't gonna happen. And he was like, no, it actually would be very safe for you to go by yourself. I promise. People will be very like welcoming. And then the guy I bought the ticket from said the same thing. He was like, oh no, you'll be so fine. But when you get here, come meet me. I'll give you the tickets and I'm going to give you a lilo, which is what they call a float. And so he
Mhm.
got me this like llama float and like
Like
a
an
bunch of water.
inflatable pool,
Yeah.
yeah.
He was like, you need water, you need a lilo. And so I like meet this other South African guy. He's like a photographer, filmmaker, like, looks like a cool dude. Seems like a cool dude. Get to Cape Town. My friends aren't coming with me. I go run to the store, get a bunch of biltong, which is like their just jerky, get a bunch of water
Mhm.
and a llama lilo. And then I drive like an hour and a half into South Africa by myself. And I was like, I was actually like really like for parts of that drive, like, am I crazy? And I would just be
Mhm.
like, tell me one more time. I know I'm being like to the guy I met in Spain and to the other guy, I was like, I know I'm being kind of like weird and needy, but I'm going to need you to tell me one more time that this is safe. So I kept getting them to
Yeah.
like reaffirm. I was like, okay, okay. Anyway, so I go and it's like this weekend with the most like kind and welcoming and loving and gracious people. And it was so funny because they would hear my accent because it was like so local, like it was only South Africans. And they would hear my
Mhm.
accent and they would be like, where are you from? And I would be like, LA. And they were like, Los Angeles? Like, how are you here? Because it's like in the
Uh-huh.
middle of a citrus field, in the middle of like farmland. Like, there's no like towns really. And it's along this like
Right.
river and there's like mountains, like up in like, so there's like mountains and this river and then citrus fields and it's just gorgeous. It's all these South Africans, and they're like, how did you end up here? And then they
Mhm.
would find out I was on my own and they would just like adopt me into their friend groups. And so I like met so many people. By the end of the weekend, I was like I never felt alone. Like I'd be walking like to get some coffee and I'd be like, oh hey, so and so, oh hey, so and so. And it felt
Mhm.
really just like warm. And I danced, honestly. I think I forget how many hours I danced. It was like a cumulative like 48 hours of like dancing or something over like
Yeah.
three. It was so nuts. My legs felt like they were going to fall off. Anyway, nothing has like restored my sense of like faith in humanity, like things like that, because people like media just
Mm.
wants you to, and like the world is made out to be so big and scary and like evil, I think. And then
Mm.
when you
Mhm.
travel, you find like situations like that and you're just like, wow, people
Yeah.
are generally really good. And I don't know, it feels really really
That's so
good to be
beautiful.
like
Yeah.
cared for by strangers. That's really what
Mhm.
happens.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's something so wonderful about This idea of making yourself accessible to connection by not by being alone, by like
Mhm.
being uncomfortable,
Mhm.
being alone, trying to be friendly, like because if you were with somebody else in
Mhm.
Spain, you would have never met that guy, you would have never
No.
heard about the thing, you would have, all the things. And so this really, this beautiful experience came from you
Totally.
making yourself available and accessible by traveling alone, which is
Yeah.
I don't feel like anybody talks about that really. There are certain I feel like there's certain personality types. You're like, oh, that person, they're so like outgoing and everything like that, and
No.
they'll be fine traveling alone. But it's not just reserved to people like
No, in
that, you
fact, like,
know?
that's why I had a ton of, like, anxiety and fear, and even when I'm traveling by myself, especially, like, initially, I always have a moment where I'm, like, feeling, like, insecure and, like, nervous to talk to people, and, and that's why it's, like, it's scary, but it's, ultimately, like, pretty, like, reaffirming, um yeah, and it was just like, I mean, it's like hands down one of the best experiences like of my life was that. Like
Mm.
that whole stint of my trip, honestly, where I was like by myself. Because it was just I also met this like Sudanese woman in Amsterdam, and she was just telling me about her life and how we were just talking, reflecting on like how wildly different our lives are, you know, because
Mm.
she actually, I'm trying to remember where she lives. I think it was Saudi Arabia. Anyway, she like lived with her boyfriend, but they had to like keep it secret because they were unmarried. And so she was
Wow.
like lived in this like expat compound, and they like had to be really careful about like never going into like the same like their apartment like together and things like that.
Wow.
And but she was like our age, so sassy and funny and witty and just like I don't know, just but grew up in just like a completely different world.
Mm.
And we just like
Mhm.
ran around Amsterdam trying on costumes for the festival. I was like, I'm going to a music festival. I need some like weird clothes. You know, and I come like, and so I would like try on like this sparkly like top. And she was just like, I have no problem with you wearing that top, but I'm noticing that I've been raised in such a like conservative like culture. The idea that you feel comfortable wearing that top in public is like really amazing to me.
Right, right.
And I was
Wow.
just like, wow. This is
Yeah.
like it was just so we like had conversations like that. She's like I
Mhm.
wouldn't even feel comfortable like putting it on, but she's like, but I want to get there and watching you like try these clothes on is like really interesting for me. And so we
Yeah.
were just like talking about like all this crazy stuff. I don't know. It's so good. And I also just want other people to do it.
Mhm.
Cuz I just think
Yeah.
it's really rewarding. Anyway.
There is something about like it's both like this expansion of like how big the world is and how small like your world quote unquote is,
Mhm.
like your like little hometown or your little community. So there's this sense of like bigness that you get to experience, but then there's this also this other sense of like wow, like we're just like all people and we're all kind of
Yes.
like the
We're
same, like
kind
we're
of the
just the
same. Like me
same.
and this girl were similar but different, you know what I mean? It
Right,
was
different
so
stories, but yes. And that's
yes,
what's
but
so
also just like
beautiful.
hit it off because we're really just
Mhm.
like two like 30-year-old girls traveling solo in Amsterdam, like, you know?
Yeah.
And I
I
mean,
think
and it does make the world also feel like smaller because you
right.
start to build connections in different places. In fact, when we went back to Cape Town, I was with the two girls I was traveling with. Like Cape Town's not big, right? But we would be like walking around Cape Town. I'd be like, "Oh, hey, girl!" to like some girl I met at like the Wolf Cop Festival. I'd be
Uh-huh.
like, "Hi! Oh my god, good to see you!" And that happened like no less than 5 times. And so the two
Uh-huh.
girls I was traveling with were like, "Okay, so you know all of Cape Town at this point." I was like,
Right, right.
It feels like it,"
Yeah.
and it just like it just makes it feel the world feels a little bit like smaller in some in like a
Mhm.
good way. Like you're just like
Like in
it's
an
not as big
intimate
and
way.
scary as
Yeah.
like yeah.
And I think that that experience of the bigness simultaneously it feeling small via like your ability to connect and empathize and identify with even very, very different people and places is so important, I think, for people when they're in like their late teens, early 20s. I feel like that there's this window, like
Mhm.
the graduated from high school, maybe until like after college, but it's just, or during college, there's just this window that I feel like having a big dose of that, having a big dose of like the world and traveling abroad creates a perspective that then will inform the like the decisions you make for the rest of your
Mhm.
life. Because like I
Mhm.
do feel like there's a distinction between people who've just stayed home
Mhm.
and people who when they were younger went and traveled and had experience and stuff like that. There's like you approach just your viewpoint of the world is different, and I think
Mhm.
it's like incredibly valuable. And I would tell all my students, especially like all my high school students, I would just say it over and over again. I would just tell them, don't get married young. One. And travel. Like if you can take a semester off, if you can for a summer,
Mhm.
like even if it's only a couple weeks, go out of this country. Get your butt
Yes.
out of this country and go to a different country
That's the
and
other
experience
thing.
another culture.
I think that, like, whenever I leave the States and come back, I have such a newfound appreciation for where we live.
Mm,
And that's a thing that I think a lot of people could use a healthy dose of right now. Because sometimes I look at, like, the conversation in the States and I'm like, you guys are so, like, everyone, please, like, just get your passport and leave for a bit and come back. Because there's,
mm,
there's like a lot that you appreciate when you leave.
yes.
At least for me, I always come back with a healthy appreciation, I think, of the
Yeah.
States. And yeah, I mean, just that. I kind of want to say that I made a choice early on that I wanted this to be a part of like who I was. And it was really scary. I know I've kind of said this, but like one of the things that I did is I made a conscious choice that I didn't want, because I remember being younger and feeling self-conscious about like eating out at a restaurant by myself
Hmm.
or like going to the movies by myself. And I remember thinking I didn't want to feel self-conscious about things like that because I wanted to be able to travel by myself. And if I was going to travel
Hmm.
by myself, I knew it was going to involve feeling comfortable sitting in a restaurant by myself and like ordering a
Right.
meal. And also
Right.
when I like thought about it, I was like, why do I feel so insecure about this? This is like in
Mm.
my early 20s, right? I was like, why is this like it's so silly? Like what? I think these random strangers like think I don't have friends or something.
Yeah, I'm like
like
curious, like
where is
what,
this
yeah,
embarrassment
what
come
is
from?
what do you know what it was? Like what the story
May
was around being alone?
I think it's actually like pretty primal. I think that we're like social creatures and that like communicates that like you're an outcast or something and you don't have
Mm-hmm.
like a social structure. But I know I'm not the only one who experiences this. Like lots of people are like,
I
I could never eat
probably
alone.
like almost everyone,
Oh,
I
I've had
think. Like,
so many. Oh, okay. I thought you were asking that like you didn't understand.
no, I was just
Like did
curious for
you
you to like pinpoint it
Oh, oh,
just
oh.
for
Do you wait, so do you experience that or have you
oh,
experienced that then?
yeah, you
Yeah,
literally had to
okay,
pep
okay.
talk me to like go have a drink by
Oh, right,
myself,
right,
remember?
right. So the way you asked that, I was like, okay,
Oh.
she doesn't relate to this.
Oh, no, I was just trying to
Let
get
me
you to
like,
expound. No,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
much relate.
All right, I forgot about this. I was like, you can go do
I
it.
was like, "I can't do it." You're like, "You can do it."
Wait, we should talk about that. So you
Yeah.
what you because I was explaining to you, it doesn't always happen, right? You have to do it more than once. But I did like used to like to go to the Walnut Wine Bar by myself and like work and then meet people. And you
It
did that.
I did it. Well, the thing is like I'm experiencing aloneness for the first time in my life.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
as
That's
somebody who
big.
always had siblings, always had roommates, always got married early, and I'm like in this phase of my life, right? And I'm experiencing being alone for the first time, which was terrifying. And like true, so deep, like deeply, deeply codependent. And but was so grateful for the tools I had to recognize that, and in going
Mhm,
into it and
mhm,
knowing I know this is going to be hard. Like I know I'm about to be alone because my girls are like off, with their dad, and I'm
mhm,
about to be alone for 5 days straight, and that has never happened before, and it's going to be hard, and I'm going to be really gentle with myself. And I remember the thing that I kept saying to myself, well, okay, here, I'll just go into it. Let me talk about aloneness, because it's like, there are these like stories we tell ourselves that aloneness is
mhm,
bad, and aloneness is
mhm,
unsafe, and
mhm,
aloneness is equals like you are not lovable, or you are not like whatever, because you don't
mhm.
have
Or there's
your
something wrong
tribe.
with you.
There's
Like
something wrong with you. Yeah.
I think that that's where my insecurity around eating in a
Mm,
restaurant by myself is like that. It's like very primal, right? Like I
mm-hmm.
don't have my tribe and like what, therefore I'm a loser? I don't even know. The thing
Right.
is like it's not if you don't like ask yourself like why does this feel embarrassing and uncomfortable? You could miss it and just like avoid dealing with it altogether,
Totally. I mean, that's what
you
I did
know?
for most of my like my entire life.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, like successfully like avoided that. And but what I did while I was like practicing being alone, that's how I approached it. Is I was just like,
Mhm.
I'm not good at this because I've never done it, and I'm going to practice doing it, and it's okay if it's hard for me. So it's like being really really gentle with myself around being alone. And
Mhm.
the I remember like that first 5 days, the very very first time I was like really alone, I just wanted to get through it without like having like
Panic attack.
panic attacks that like land me in the hospital. And I did it, and I was like, okay, that was hard, but I like did, and now I have in my head I can be alone and be okay. And so
Yeah.
then I got to work with that fear part of me that was like, I'm not going to be okay because I'm alone and I'm
Mm,
scared.
mhm.
So I was like, I survived, I'm okay. And then I just started practicing it more and more, and then we got to and I remember the like affirmation that I was saying to myself is, I want to learn how to enjoy my own company. That's how I
Mhm.
viewed aloneness, not as
Mhm.
I'm lacking community or I'm
Mhm.
lacking like a tribe. It's
Mhm.
I am enjoying my own company right now, and having
Yeah,
a like
yeah.
a ton of fun by myself right now, and
Mhm.
viewing it as like a consensual thing. Like, I'm alone. I
I
don't
chose
have to be
this.
alone right now. I'm
I
choosing this.
chose
Yeah.
this. Yes, I
And
think that's
so,
important.
yeah, it's so important to not feel like you're a victim of your aloneness, although there is sometimes that, like, feeling abandoned, and there's that too. But that's like what
Mhm.
we're talking about is like choosing and practicing being alone. And so I remember calling you and being like, okay, I have like, I want to go sit someplace, have a drink, read a book, and be just around people and be alone. But I had all this fear, like all this fear, like
Mhm.
blocking me, and I remember just talking to you, and you're like, you were just telling me all the things that you love about it. And it was so encouraging. And I went and did it, and it was fine. I just chatted with the bartender, and I just like people watched, and it was fine. And I need to do more of that. I feel like through the winter I kind of like hermited, but I want to do like more of that, because circling back to what we're talking about earlier, it opens you up
Mhm.
for connection, friendship, conversation, whatever, which is really
Yeah,
beautiful.
totally.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it, like, can feel it still, for me, feels awkward, and actually, I notice I have more resistance to it, I think, a little as I get older.
Mm.
Like, I'm just like, that feels uncomfortable. I don't want to." I think I was more, like, tolerant of discomfort almost when I was younger. It's like as I've
Yeah,
gotten older, I'm like, "I like to be comfortable."
that makes sense. Oh
I
yeah, I
also love
resonate with that.
home, which is like a big thing for me. I'm constantly like telling Ben this, and he's like, I hear, I hear you. And I'm like, you don't understand. For like most of my life, I would travel and then I would get on a plane to go back to wherever I was living with whatever like situation I was in. And I would like be dreading going back,
Hmm.
dreading it. And now, for the last like few years or whatever, for the first time in my life, in the last like 3 or so years, I get on a plane from a trip to go home, and I am like so excited to be home.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
is a massive accomplishment for me
I remember
because
when
it
that
means I,
happened to
like,
you. I
love my
remember
life.
yes. I
And
remember
I'm
you
like,
called me and you were like, "What is
"Mm."
happening?" Like,
It's
I'm longing for home. Like, and it
I've
was such
never
a
longed
new
for home.
feeling. It's just
Yeah.
so good. It's so good.
It's so
Yeah.
good, and I try to remind myself that now, because now actually I think what happens is, like, the end of a trip is coming, and it's like when you know, like, there's the last 2 days, your mind starts being like, "Okay, I wanna go
Mhm.
home now." So I think no matter how long my trip is, I start to, like, towards the end, like, long for home. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, every time we get on a plane to go home, I, like, just talk Ben's ear off about it. 'Cause I'm
Yeah.
like 'cause I
Oh,
just,
that's so
I have
sweet.
so many memories of getting on a plane to go home and just, like, crying because I, like,
Yeah.
hated the life I was going back to, and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just such a,
There
like,
is something,
contrast.
and this is something I've learned from you. I think I've learned to like be more attentive to this, but I think that the feeling of going home, like,
Mhm.
and that plane flight or that ride or whatever that
Mhm.
thing is after you've been away for a while and you're coming back, there is this almost like this like really precious access to some
Yes.
really amazing
Yes.
information that you have
Yes.
an opportunity to tap into
Oh my
right
god.
then.
It's so
Yeah.
informative. It's so informative
Mhm.
because I don't know if this happens for everyone, but for me, what happens is because I start thinking about the things I'm excited to go back about and the things I'm, like, not so excited to deal with,
Right.
and the
Right.
things that I'm, like, not so excited to deal with, I'm like, "Okay, that's, like, an indicator that something here needs to, like in this particular department could use some attention, because 'cause I'm, like,
Yeah.
not thrilled about this particular area, right? And in
Yes.
the past, it was,
Mhm.
like, my relationship, where I was living, and what I was doing for work, and, like, who
It
I
was
was
just
as a
all
person.
life,
I was just
the
like,
life.
and now it might be like, "No, I need to, like I would like to, like, hang out, like, build my community more," or something, like, subtle. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this one area, like, could use some attention." I don't know. And that's
Mhm.
just,
Dialing
like
it in. Yeah.
I think you just gain perspective from, like, stepping away
Mm.
from your routine, really is what it is, because
Yes.
you pull yourself out of your
Yes.
routine, and it gives you a chance to kinda look at it and think, like, "Is this what I want? Do I want to keep doing
Exactly.
this thing?"
Yeah.
Because you can just get on, like, autopilot. So
Yeah. And I think I feel like really most of my life I just went back, just like got back into the swing of things. But after you like told me about that, now like every time I'm like flying back, I'm journaling. I'm like
yes.
thinking about the things. I'm just trying to and the journaling is just like accessing the feelings that are coming up when
Mhm.
I think about going home, what comes up. And that is so informative. It's like such a gift because you because you've had that distance, like you were saying, you
Mhm.
kind of like have access to like a certain
Yeah.
clarity maybe about like what's working, what's not working, what
Mhm.
things need to change, what things are like yes things,
Mhm.
um and that's like this like this gift that I learned from you that is like I think really valuable and I think easy to implement,
Yes. It's the best. It's like it's
yeah.
one of my favorite, like, ways to unstick myself if I'm feeling really stuck and, like, what's going
Mm.
on. That's, like, what Bali was.
Hmm.
Bali was, like, an absolutely a trip because I was feeling so stuck in so many areas.
Right.
And so I was like like that, reel we made where it was like anytime anything remotely inconvenient happens in my 20s, I just, like, pack up and
Uh-huh.
I'm like, "Peace," which
On a
isn't the
plane,
healthiest
yeah.
thing. Because that was another win, was when Ben and I were having, like, experiencing conflict or whatever, and I'd be like, "Wow, I don't wanna book a flight. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I really like this
Yes.
human." Then
Mhm.
my gut reaction
Mm.
isn't, let's pull up Google Flights and, like, get the fuck out of here.
Right, right. I know. That's so good. So good.
Yeah, I think
Mm.
taking, like, small dates on your own is important, like
Like
little
little nights
stuff.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. I
There's this book.
love going to the movies by myself. I love going and
Yeah.
getting, like, a delicious meal, going to the movies by myself. That's, like, one of my favorites, honestly.
Mhm.
It didn't used to be,
Mhm.
though. That one felt real awkward and embarrassing for some reason at first. I was like, "Nope,
Yeah.
I will not be embarrassed by this."
Yeah. Yeah. That's one that I've been practicing. I've gone to a few movies by myself. I still need to do more of like the going like
Getting
going to
dinner?
sit down at a restaurant and eating
Yes.
food. Yeah, I
That's a
haven't
big
really
one.
done
It
much
feels
of
a
that.
little weird,
Yeah.
but it's also,
But
like,
like I want to go
nice.
someplace. Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to go someplace nice. Like go to Curate or go like sit down someplace nice and sit at
Somewhere
the
with a
bar and
nice
get a
bar,
nice.
yes. Somewhere with a
Yeah.
nice bar. I
Yeah.
love sitting at the bar, because then there are other
Yeah.
people who are usually, like, traveling or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
great. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's, I don't know, there's some kind of like maybe a resilience or
Yes,
a
just
sense
about
of
to talk about this.
self-trust. Yeah, that you develop when you're like okay being alone, and you're not only are you just, oh, you're okay, but you're like having a great time and you're enjoying yourself and you're enjoying what you're experiencing. There's, I think that's so good to have that, you know?
Yeah, and I don't even think that you have to, like, be alone in this experience. It's just that you have to kind of, like, go into it without the comfort of a companion, because then
Mm.
it can turn into something that includes other people, but
Uh-huh.
it's, like,
Yeah.
not something that you planned, you
Right.
know? And yeah, and I think that that's where, like, for me, self-trust and self-reliance, which are, like, two of the, like, most important character traits, for me, to me,
Mm.
like, that I think is, like, important to, like, cultivate, like, across your life. And I attribute so much of, like, my strength in those areas to this. But it was
Right.
like, it just definitely was a choice. It wasn't something
Yeah.
that, like, I don't know, I think people see that or see me, like, traveling like that and like, "Oh, she's just, like, she's just brave." And I'm like, "No, I'm actually, like, scared shitless when I do it,
Yeah.
like, when I'm starting." But I just know that it's worth it,
Yeah.
because on the other side is just, like, honestly feeling safer in the world,
Mm.
because you, like, have a sense of trust in your own, like, ability to, like, um, navigate things and, like,
Yeah.
figure things out. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
so wonderful. I love it. Yeah,
that's
so here's
good.
to practicing more of that. Like I'm so actively like in that phase in my life right now, and it feels good
Mhm.
to look at it that way. Looking at it as something that I'm practicing, looking at it as something that like I'm cultivating and developing this
Mhm.
resilience and this connection to my sense of self and self-trust and all that, and viewing it that way as opposed to I'm alone and I whatever. You can make it real negative, you know? It's like real easy to go down that negative spiral, you know?
It's also fun to practice, like, trying, like, I do this thing sometimes where I, like, wanna, like, call something in when I do this. Remember, like, when I
Mm-hmm.
was in, and that can be fun too, where I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna go eat at a restaurant by myself. I'm gonna sit at the bar. I'm gonna meet someone interesting and unexpected." And then I
Mm-hmm.
did that when I was in Zion. I was like, "I'm gonna go find a place to eat, and I'm gonna find somebody to go on a hike with me tomorrow." And then I, like,
Uh-huh.
met that really cool girl from
Yeah.
LA. She was
Yeah.
awesome. I just, like, sat down next to her and, like, struck up a conversation, and we, like, had a blast the next day. She was
Mm-hmm.
awesome, and we were actually staying at, like, the same campground, so it was great. She didn't know where she was going. I was like, "Oh, it's great, follow me," and it ended up being,
Yeah.
we, like, sat out by the bonfire and, like, talked late, and then the next day, she was supposed to go back to LA, but I convinced her to go on a hike with me instead, and we were, like,
Mm-hmm.
trouncing through a river in Zion, and she was like, "This is just so nice." It's like,
Yeah, you're so good at
it was
manifesting that
so
kind of stuff. But I think that there's something about just setting the intention around like I'm
yeah.
available for connection. And I think that people pick
Yes,
up
because it's
on
an
that feeling.
energy.
Yeah.
Totally.
Hmm.
But I have also sat at a bar or a restaurant and been like, "Don't fucking talk to me."
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Where you're like,
Yeah.
"I'm eating a meal and no one talk to me,"
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
just not in
Yeah.
the mood for it. It's like both are
Right.
fine.
Hmm.
But, yeah, I think this is, like, one of the best ways, honestly, to, like, have better faith in the world and cultivate self-trust,
Yeah.
honestly. Obviously, you have
Yes.
to be smart and, like, do it in a safe place. There are some
Hmm.
countries where you shouldn't do things like that. I feel like that's
There's a
obvious, but
distinct like
all of a sudden that, like,
recklessness
struck
and
me. I was like, "Maybe we
yeah.
should add this one caveat, like, do it in a safe place."
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Safe decisions. Ah, I love
Totally.
this. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. I hope my kids wanna travel a bunch. I hope they do a
They
gap
will if you
year.
just make them do it from when they were little. Like
Yeah.
it'll just be, that's what we do.
I'm I'm traveling with my kids. I'm saying it now. There's just no way.
Mm.
And everybody's like, "Oh, it ends when you have kids." I'm like, "Okay.
I mean, I did like long road trips. My
We shall
girls have done
see."
12 and 17-hour road trips, like multiple ones every year since they were infants. Like,
And
so
it's
they're
fun.
used to that. And they've got
Yeah.
good skills. Like they've got like good traveling skills. They like know how to travel. And I think that's like a good thing for a kid to have, you
One of
know?
my favorite stories that I've ever heard in my entire life was the one that your friend told, where she was in France with her kids. And the train door closed on him and he got
Oh,
separated.
yes,
And
yes.
she was telling me the story and I was like, "You're my fucking hero." And she said that
Uh-huh.
she just looked at her like son, who was like, how old was he? Maybe like 12 or something.
Right. Yeah. He was
Or
not
or I
that
think he
old.
was young. I think he was younger. But they
Hmm.
got split up on the train in France somewhere, and she said she looked at him through the train and was like, "You know what to do."
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, "What did he do? I don't know what he's
But
supposed to
what
do."
was
Like, I'm like
it?
edge of my seat. And then she said she got
Uh-huh.
on the next one, got off at the next station, and there he was standing next to a police officer. And apparently had like gone up to the police officer and was like in French trying to explain
Mm.
like, what, like his mom, where his mom, like what had happened or whatever. And then she just like got him. They were reconnected, and the police officer was like, "I'm so impressed."
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
your son just came up to me and was like, "I lost my mom. She's gonna get off on the next train. Here we are. Like, can I stand by you?"
Yeah.
And then he did that, and then she got off, and like they were fine, and it was like probably really freaky. But I just was like, "Oh my God." Like, if I had the sense, like there's so much that had to happen for all of that to be okay. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, she prepared him and he knew what to
Mm-hmm.
do and they
Mm-hmm.
executed and it was great. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, I love
So
that shit.
good.
It's so
Resilience.
good.
Yes.
That kid's gonna move
Amazing.
through the world feeling like confident in himself. Or at least
Yeah.
just like, like he knows what to do.
Relatively capable. Yeah. Good
Yeah,
decision
like
making. Yeah.
competent is probably the real world
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
Competent. Yeah, not necessarily confident, but
Mm-hmm.
anyway, love it.
I love that.
Love it.
Love it. Okay.
Travel.
Yeah. So
Do
good.
things by yourself. There's no
Mm-hmm.
reason to feel weird.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
love
And
you.
that is
That
our
is
words of encouragement for the day.
that's the show. Thanks for tuning
Woo!
in.
Till next